Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for coming, for those who did come and for those who are missing. Hope to have seen you here. Thank you guys for coming to tonight's meeting. We are really excited to have the amazing, the wonderful Dr. Ayla Donlin here tonight. She is the director of the Life Fit Center here at Cal State Long Beach. And I am just going to go ahead and pass the mic right over to you. You should be able to share your screen whenever and take it away.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Alexa. And I will shortly share my screen, but I just want to say that it's lovely to be here with the Exercise is Medicine on Campus student organization and all student participants who are here now or watching this recording. And I think I know I have Jacqueline, maybe Alexa too, some background in that. I'm really pleased to see how well the Exercise is Medicine on Campus group is doing, because back in 2012, 2013, I was actually a part of the original group and crew that was a part of founding the Exercise is Medicine on Campus branch at California State University, Long Beach, and helped our very first president and vice president students navigate their way into establishing the organization. So it's been so fun to watch you all thrive and grow and expand. And I know that this context in particular has been challenging through the pandemic as far as engaging and helping people to engage with exercise as medicine in some different ways, some virtual formats. But I think it's a great exploration in terms of how we can expand offerings and opportunities for folks into the virtual space as well. So thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm going to share my screen. And tonight, what I have prepared for you, and let me get into presentation mode here, friends. All right, can you all see that okay? Can I get a thumbs up? Fabulous. Okay, what I have prepared for you this evening, or whenever you're watching this recording, is a little conversation, discussion, some thought around your wellness framework. And we're going to talk about 4 realms of wellness. So certainly exercise is medicine, and we're going to talk about the physical realm and the role that fitness and exercise play in our well-being and in our wellness framework. But we're going to look holistically and comprehensively at our wellness as well. So what I want to invite you to do, those of you who are here in person, please, if you've got questions, comments, I invite you to unmute yourself and engage with me. You can also place comments in the chat, and I'll check the chat periodically for any questions or comments, and we'll move on from there. And then if you're watching this recording, then please feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you some of the ways that you can get in touch with me here at the end of the presentation so that we can stay in touch. And if you have any questions or comments, you can share them with me that way. So let's move into the 4 wellness realms, what they are. If you get into wellness and well-being literature, you're going to see that there are hundreds of different ways that wellness and well-being are conceptualized, and really different ways that they're examined in the research as well. So what I've done studying well-being for over 15 years now, I've essentially distilled the research that I've reviewed, the education that I have had, and of course my lived experience into what I consider 4 comprehensive realms of wellness. And I break them into physical wellness, mental emotional wellness, social wellness, and spiritual wellness. And we're going to unpack each of those a little bit more, but that's the critical or the essential framework. And there's a very similar framework from one of my favorite behavioral scientists, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who was at Harvard University, and he's now teaching, I think, at Columbia. And he has a framework called SPIRE. So you'll notice it's very similar, right? So his wellness realms are spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. I've essentially combined the intellectual and emotional realms into one. So those are just some examples of different frameworks or different conceptualizations of wellness or well-being. We're going to be talking about the 4 wellness realms tonight. Any thoughts, questions, comments on that before I move on? Okay, then moving right ahead. Physical wellness, we can break into 3 primary components. And we went for some alliteration here. Fitness, fuel, and frequency. So fitness you can think about as your movement habits and behaviors. And as I'm defining each of these realms, I'd love for you to visualize what these realms look like in your life right now, and perhaps what you'd like these realms to look like in your life in an ideal scenario, right? So fitness is your movement habits and behaviors. What are your current movement habits and behaviors, and what would they look like in an ideal scenario? Fuel is your nutritional habits and behaviors. And I want to make an important point here in that I view food and nutrition as fuel, but not just fuel for the body and the mind from an energetic standpoint, from an energy standpoint, but also psychologically, right? Because our relationship with food has psychological components and really social components too that weave throughout. So food is fuel in many different ways, right? And then frequency, you can think of as your rest and relaxation habits and behaviors. So it's kind of the restoration component. Are you planning in throughout your day, throughout your week, throughout your month, and throughout your year, periods of time where you rest, relax, and restore so that you can engage in the activities that you want to, and that you can fulfill your role and identity as you want to throughout your different responsibilities and commitments. So that is the realm of physical wellness. Any thoughts, questions on that? And I always offer a nice long pause, which I recognize can feel like an awkward pause, but we do that just to create space so that folks can weigh in at any time. So again, I welcome you at any time. You can unmute, you can put it in the chat, put thoughts, comments in the chat. Let me make a special note here in this realm of physical wellness, since this is Exercise is Medicine on campus, student organization. I think that the role of exercise in our wellness is so much more than just physical. Exercise, of course, is a wonderful preventive medicine component where we can keep ourselves healthy, ward off chronic disease to the best of our ability. And through consistent habits in the realm of exercise, we set ourselves up for success physically. But exercise also, as we know, has incredible psychological benefits. It can have incredible social benefits where it can connect us to groups of people, much like you all have connected here in this organization. And I think it has some spiritual aspects as well in terms of the mind-body connection and our relationship to the energy that we experience and the energy that we put out into the universe. So the reciprocity of energy in and out. So those are all things to think about as we think about exercise as medicine. In the realm of mental emotional wellness, we have focus, feed, and feel good. Focus is your ability to hold your awareness and your attention where you want to when you want to. Sounds easy in concept, but so hard in application, right? For us to actually pay attention to and hold our awareness where we want to, when we want to. That's a skill set. And it's a skill set that we can improve and we can train. And some of the best mechanisms to train our awareness and our attention are through the modalities of meditation and mindfulness practice. So that's a beautiful way of expanding your bandwidth for attentional awareness. Well, for awareness and attentional awareness, our ability to be aware of, where is my attention? Am I paying attention to what I want to? Do I notice when my mind has wandered away from what I want to be attending to? Those are powerful skill sets that serve us in so many different areas. Feed is our ability to offer ourselves both mental and emotional stimulation and growth. So as students, this is a time of life where your mental and emotional growth, like the curve is just like, woo, because there's so many different ways that you can engage your mind and your emotions right now. And something to think about, and this is maybe a consideration for a little further down the road, how do you want to continue that? So if you have an innate love of learning, and so you enjoy being a student, how will you continue those mechanisms of feeding your mind and your emotional stimulation and growth post-student life? Because you can put some of those practices into play now, which is really a great thing to think about. And then feel good is your ability to cultivate positive emotions, and it's your resilience. It's your ability to recover from or bounce back from a setback. Because inevitably in life, right, we're going to experience it. We're going to experience ups and downs, highs and lows. And our ability to recover from the setbacks that are going to happen, no matter how well planned we are, really can serve us well over time if we're able to recover pretty quickly back to a pretty stable and steady baseline. And there are very specific mechanisms that we can use to cultivate positive emotions. So I have a little pop quiz here, friends. Since we're mid-semester and you're fatigued anyway, let's throw a pop quiz in there. What do you think is the easiest positive emotion to self-generate? So it doesn't have to come externally or be stimulated externally. You can self-generate this positive emotion. What do you think it is? The easiest one. You can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself.
Is it perspective?
Ron, I love that guess. And in a way, yes, but the short answer is no, it's not necessarily perspective. I see someone put something in the chat, multiple things in the chat. Happiness. Ooh, 2 guesses for happiness. Happiness is a little too general. We're looking for something more specific. It's a very specific positive emotion. And there's a wonderful researcher named Barbara Fredrickson who's dedicated her scientific career to studying our human experience of positive emotion. And she actually, through her research, says happiness is just a little too general to really even consider as like a positive emotion. It's more like mood based, right? And so positive emotions are things like love, joy, amusement, interest, awe, right? So that's the list. And Sylvia, I see you guessed joy. Joy is not it. Anyone else want to give a guess of the positive emotion that's the easiest for us to self-generate? I'm gonna give you, oh, here we go. What is it?
The love.
Love is a great guess. It's not love. I'm gonna give you all a hint. It's October now. We're about to celebrate Halloween. And then what's the holiday that comes after Halloween? And a full tummy, Alexa, that's a very great second. Daniel, bing, 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 bing. Gratitude. We got it. So thanks. I was going for Thanksgiving time, which does equal a full tummy. And if you're hearing any background noise, those of you who are watching the recording, you need to know that we've got a toddler in the room, 3.5-year-old, who I'm grateful for, but we're likely to get some little toddler-like interruptions here and there. But gratitude is it. And we can self-generate gratitude as a way of boosting our experience of positive emotion, which is scientifically validated to increase our overall well-being. And what's just an interesting side note, in some of Barbara Fredrickson's research, what she noticed was, and this was over time, so this is a big body of research, she and her colleagues noticed that if individuals could cultivate or experience positive emotions at a ratio of 6:1, 6 positive emotions to every 1 negative emotion experienced. I don't necessarily like to label emotions as positive or negative, but this is what's in the literature, so that's why I'm using that, right? But negative emotion or challenging emotions would be things like sadness, anxiety, loneliness, right? So if we can be intentional about trying to experience positive emotions at a ratio of 6 to every 1 negative emotion that we experience, we're more likely to boost our baseline and general level of well-being. So that can be just something to think about in terms of being intentional about seeking out positive emotions. I'll give you just one more example before we move on. The positive emotion of awe. A great question to ask yourself when thinking about how to cultivate more positive emotions would be, what precipitates my experience of this positive emotion? So with the positive emotion of awe, I know for me, a lot of that is being in nature. When I'm in nature, I'm in awe. Like if you've seen the moon the last few nights, I mean, in awe, right? Of that beautiful, big, full moon. And so I know if I want to experience more awe in my life, then I need to be intentional and proactive and get out in nature so that I can experience it. So those are just some ways that we can cultivate positive emotion. Thoughts, questions, comments on mental emotional wellness?
In regards to meditation, what kind of advice do you have for people who want to get into that? I think it can kind of be intimidating at first, and it's also something that's really hard to really get into correctly. So what kind of advice do you have for that?
Yes, Alexa, I appreciate that question so much, because I think so many of us, when we're exploring meditation or mindfulness, it can be overwhelming because there's this sense of like, well, am I doing it wrong? What is it supposed to feel like? How am I supposed to experience it? How long should I meditate for? There's thoughts coming into my mind. Is that bad? Is my mind supposed to be blank? Right? All of those questions. And so some advice that I would give as you are exploring meditation and mindfulness would be to keep in mind, first and foremost, that we call these things practices for a reason. A meditation practice, a mindfulness practice, because that's exactly what they are. We're simply practicing those skill sets. There's no one way or right way of doing mindfulness or doing meditation. There's no one universal right experience. It's not about creating a blank mind. It's about training that muscle of attentional awareness, being aware of our mind, watching thoughts, feelings, emotions float through, which is going to happen inevitably. We can't turn off thoughts or emotions or feelings, but instead we can observe them, and we can observe them from a place of non-judgment, and a place of empathy, a place of self-compassion, and somewhat detachment, right? Where it's like, oh, that's an interesting thought. Okay, I see you. All right, there you go. So instead of getting attached to it or pulled along with it or getting into a spiral, we're just kind of watching, observing, non-judgmentally. So that's the advice I would give. And I'd give the advice of starting small. There's no specific duration of meditation that you should necessarily start with or aim for. So I'd say starting with a very simple 5-breath meditation where you literally say in your mind, I am breathing in 1, I am breathing out 1, and you do that and you count up to 5. I think that's a beautiful place to start because it gives your mind something to anchor into and pay attention to, the breath and that counting of breath. And that probably takes somewhere between 30 seconds and a minute, depending on your breathing rhythm. Yeah, so that would be my recommendation of a good starting point. All right, so we'll move into social wellness. And here we have family, friends, and fellows. And fellows, I mean in a very gender neutral way. I don't mean like fellas, like men, gentlemen. This is like colleagues, fellows, right? So family is our ability to nurture meaningful connections with those we consider family. Doesn't necessarily need to be biological family. These are the folks that we consider our family. Friends, that's our ability to establish and maintain those same meaningful connections with those that we consider friends. And friends come in so many different varieties, right? We've got really close friends, we have more acquaintance type friends, we have friends where the relationship is a little bit more transactional, not in a negative way or a using way, but just in terms of like, you know, maybe this is someone who we're in a couple of classes with and we help each other study. So that's kind of a little bit more of a transactional friendship, right? So we can think about how do we establish and maintain these connections across these different friend groups as well. And then fellows, this is our ability to cultivate and maintain relationships with those that we would consider colleagues, neighbors, folks in our community, etc. So in all of these areas, one thing that I would recommend that you do is make a list, a physical list of your top 3 to 5 people. So this is across all of these groups. Your top 3 to 5 people who are your closest and most meaningful social connections. And then ask a couple of questions. Ask, number 1, do those folks know that they are in my top 5? And if they don't, you should probably tell them, and that will help to strengthen that social connection too. And then another question to ask is, how do I know and how do they know that they're in my top 5? Are these the folks I'm spending the most of my time with? Are these the folks that I'm investing most of my energy and attention into? And if those things don't align, if where you're investing your time and your energy socially doesn't match up with how you identify your top relationships, then you've got some work to do to reconcile that, because it'll always feel a little off if we're not doing that work of making sure that our top people are getting our top energy and attention. Does that make sense? And you've, being college students, you've got a lot of relationships in these realms, family, friends, fellows. And it can get easy, I think, to kind of get sucked into spending time, energy, and attention in areas and with people that aren't necessarily your top people. And that's important work to do so that you're not getting drained, because often our top people are also the people who are putting back into us. And it can be pretty draining to be putting out a lot of time and energy in other areas. So I encourage you to do that work of identifying your top people and aligning your time and energy accordingly. Now in the realm of spiritual wellness, we have foundation, faith, and freedom. Foundation is your sense of meaning and purpose, and that can come from a lot of different things. So if you think about that, where do I derive my sense of meaning and purpose? These are like the big questions of life, right? The big existential questions. And I think that's an important one to think about, not necessarily to have a specific answer for, but to think about, where do I derive my sense of meaning and purpose? And faith is your clarity in terms of who and what you believe in. Maybe it's a specific religious system. Maybe it's a particular practice or way that you care for your mind and your body. Maybe it's a set of principles and morals that you uphold and value, and that you're clear on those. And freedom is your sense of belonging and your ability to let go of unhealthy thoughts, behaviors, and relationships. That's huge, because our sense of belonging and connectedness, that's one of the basic needs of human beings. So it's an important question for us to ask ourselves in terms of, where do I derive my sense of belonging? Where do I obtain my sense of connectedness? What communities am I a part of, and do I identify with? Because those fulfill us from a wellness and well-being standpoint hugely. And as you're exploring spiritual wellness, I think this can be one of the realms of wellness that can be the most neglected. And so another big question to ask yourself is, am I a human being? Thank you. Lucy's hooking me up with some gum. That's good. Thanks, baby. So here's a big question to ask yourself. I love how this is what toddlers do. You're about to explore these huge existential questions of life, right? And then a toddler comes in asking you if you want to stick a gum. Those interruptions, I think, are perfect, because that is life, right? So I was about to say, I think a big question in the realm of spiritual wellness is, am I a human being having a spiritual experience in this life, or am I a spiritual being having a human experience? That's a big question, and I'm just going to leave that one there for us to think about. So now, in terms of your framework, and this is what we'll wrap up with, think about and identify, of those 4 realms: physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual, which realms are you well balanced in, or which realms seem to be full, right? If you think of them as buckets, which realms need some work, right? Like maybe you've neglected particular realms because you've put a lot of time and energy into one specific realm. That's also the nature of life, right? Where there are seasons of life where we're focused on one realm more than the other, or more than the others. And that's okay too. Balance can happen across time. Not all of the realms need to be perfectly balanced all of the time. Another way of thinking about balance would be, maybe physical and mental, emotional are high, and social and spiritual are low now, but maybe that will flip in the next quarter. And so that would also be a way of balancing things. What I want to encourage you to do as you're exploring these questions is to pick one element within one realm. So for example, in the realm of mental emotional wellness, pick the element of focus and establish an action plan to work on that. For example, starting in on some meditation or mindfulness. Okay, Lou, Mom's just going to finish up and then I'll help you, okay? And so explore that and keep it simple, friends. because if you try to tackle all of the elements within all of the realms, there's 12 different elements because each realm has 3 elements. It's overwhelming. So pick one element in one realm, build out an action plan, keep it simple so that it's something that you can be consistent with, because it's in the consistency where we have sustainability, especially of behavioral habits, right? And really the name of the game, like consistency is queen if we want to sustain healthy habits and behaviors over time. And we can remain more consistent when we simplify as much as possible. So I'm going to leave it there. If anyone has questions, comments, I'm here and would love to address them.
Just out of curiosity, since you've devoted a lot of your work to this in specific, I'm sure there's moments where you probably applied it to your own life. Was there a particular realm that you had the most difficulty in trying to navigate or adapt to your life?
That's a great question, Alexa, and I really appreciate that question. I'd say that one of the areas that I probably struggled with in undergrad, which is probably where quite a few of you are right now, I struggled with a busy mind and almost like an anxious mind, a perfectionist mind in a lot of ways. And I recognized that that was just not a healthy space for me, and not a space that I wanted to be in. And so I did a lot of work in the mental emotional realm and in the areas of meditation and mindfulness to make my mind a more friendly place to be and to hang out. And as a way of managing some of the stress and the anxiety that come with balancing student life and all that is. So I'd say that's probably a realm where when I was at your stage of undergrad and graduate education too, that was a realm that I was pouring a lot of time and energy into, because I recognized that that would make my overall wellness and well-being so much better. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I have a question.
Yeah, Ron.
So with these, so when keeping your buckets full, as you said earlier, do you know if any structural changes within the brain that occur as you fill your buckets up with gratitude or physically or socially, etc.?
Yeah, excellent question. Some of the research in the areas of meditation and mindfulness have shown structural change. So for example, like changes in our neural networks, expansion of neural networks, and just different communication pathways within those neural networks. And so, yes, I think that there are like literal physiological brain changes that occur as the result of working on these different realms. And something that I can actually speak to as a mother in the realm of social wellness. Some of the research that I've reviewed in the area of pregnancy and parenthood, what's fascinating about a pregnant woman's brain, the gray matter of her brain literally changes throughout the course of pregnancy and into parenthood, because it's like restructuring and rewiring in a way that's setting up for parenthood. And that changes as the result of a lot of the different pregnancy hormones that flow throughout the course of pregnancy. And so again, that's like a social relationship and aspect, right, of a woman and her baby through pregnancy. So yeah, all of these different realms, I think, have different ways of pulling on physiological structures and creating change, some of which within our brain, which is pretty amazing. Does that answer your question, Ron?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Any other questions, my friends?
I actually have one more question.
Yeah, fire away.
So, with developing any habits, you stated that consistency creates sustainability. So, for someone who might be struggling with starting to get into exercise, what would be the best step one base level first step for them to take that you would advise them to take?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ron. I would advise someone who is just beginning an exercise program to start with the critical question of, what do I enjoy most? How do I enjoy moving my body the most? And then I would recommend starting there and building a foundation and programming there, thinking about the FIT principle: frequency, intensity, time, and type. So we're really starting by identifying type. How do I enjoy moving my body, right? And then from there, we can build out the habit in terms of, okay, how many days a week do I have to dedicate to that frequency? At what intensity? Maybe I don't want to like get super sweaty or be super intense initially. That's fine. Like, movement is movement, and a little bit is better than none, right? And then time would be duration. So how long am I going to move for this way that I enjoy moving my body? And then and so then you can play with those different variables: frequency, intensity, and time, but starting small so that you can be consistent over time. Okay, Mom's almost done. Does that answer your question, Ron?
Yes, thank you so much.
You bet. All right, I think we're on toddler timeline here, friends. I'm gonna make my way off the call. I wish you all the best for the remainder of the semester and beyond. Ways that you can get in touch with me. Here, I'm gonna drop them in the chat. My email address, and then Alexa or whoever is responsible for sharing this information out with people can distribute. Here's my email address, Ayla Donlin at CSULB.edu. I'm on Instagram at Ayla Donlin Wellness, so you can connect with me there. And then my website is ayladonlinwellness.com, and you can connect with me there too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayla. We really appreciate it. Thank you. It's always like these kinds of meetings. I don't know, after this happens, I get very inspired. And then I'm like, wow, I want to go do something. And then it tends to die down a little bit. But it's like, I want to take it and run with it, you know?
Yeah, so that's why I pick one thing, one element within one realm, and then just do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you having you here. Thank you to those who did make it and those who didn't. We hope to see you guys next week. Thank you.